Some houses don't just hold memories, they trap them. They absorb the grief, the rage, and the final rattling breaths of those who die within their walls, baking those dark emotions into the very foundation. I know this to be true, because I didn't just grow up in a house. I grew up inside a grave. If you've ever lived in a place where the shadows seem to move just a fraction of a second after you do, or where the air suddenly drops 10 degrees for absolutely no reason, then turn the lights off, lock your doors, and listen closely. Because what I am about to tell you is 100% true. And the terrifying part, the things that haunted me might just be looking for a new place to stay. My childhood home was a sprawling, suffocating colonial estate built in 1809. It stood at the end of a long, winding dirt road, surrounded by ancient weeping willows that scraped against the upper-story windows like skeletal fingers when the wind blew. My parents were completely enamored with the historic charm of the property. They saw original hardwood floors, hand-carved mahogany staircases, and antique brass fixtures. I, even at 7 years old, saw something else entirely. I felt an immediate, crushing sense of wrongness the moment my sneakers touched the threshold. It was a visceral, heavy dread that settled in the pit of my stomach, a biological alarm bell screaming at me to run. But you can't exactly tell your parents that their dream home is a nightmare, so I kept my mouth shut. I tried to convince myself it was just an overactive imagination. I was wrong.
It didn't take long for the house to reveal its true nature. It became glaringly obvious that we were not alone. There wasn't just one ghost in that house. There were two distinct, terrifying entities, and they had claimed completely different territories. The upstairs belonged to her. My bedroom was at the end of a long, dimly lit hallway on the second floor. Almost every night, the same sequence of events would unfold. It would start with the smell. You know how old houses usually smell like dust and pine sol? This was different. Out of nowhere, my room would suddenly reek of a sickeningly sweet, overpowering floral perfume. It smelled like heavily powdered lavender mixed with the faint, sour odor of wilting roses, the kind of scent you associate with a closed casket funeral. Whenever that smell flooded the room, the temperature would plummet. You could literally see your breath misting in the air, even in the dead of July.
Then came the closet. It was a massive, built-in wardrobe with heavy, solid oak doors that clicked securely shut. But they never stayed shut. I would lie awake, completely paralyzed by fear, staring into the dark. Click. The brass latch would turn on its own. Creak. The heavy oak door would slowly swing open, revealing a pitch-black void inside. I would pull the covers up to my eyes, tears streaming down my face, begging silently for it to stop. "Mom!" I yelled out one night, unable to take it anymore. I heard her hurried footsteps on the stairs, and the moment she crossed the threshold of my room, the freezing temperature vanished. The perfume smell evaporated. "What is it, honey? Did you have a nightmare?" she asked, sitting on the edge of my bed and stroking my hair. "The closet," I sobbed, pointing a trembling finger at the open door. "It opened again, and
and I smelled the old lady."
My mother sighed, giving me a sympathetic but dismissive smile. "Sweetheart, we've talked about this. It's an old house. The floors settle, the frames warp, and the latches pop open. As for the smell, the previous owners probably spilled some old perfume in the floorboards. It just gets stirred up when the wind blows." "It's not the wind," I whispered. But the absolute worst part of the upstairs entity wasn't the smell or the doors. It was the bed. Several times a month, I would be lying on my side, facing the wall, trying desperately to fall asleep. Suddenly, the springs behind me would groan. I would feel the mattress physically dip and compress, pulling me slightly backward as a heavy, unseen weight sat down right on the edge of my bed. I could feel the cold radiating off of whatever was sitting there. I never turned around. I knew that if I looked, I would lose my mind. I would simply lie there, rigid, holding my breath, until the mattress finally popped back up and the presence faded away. She was sad. She was cold. And she was always there. But as terrifying as the old woman upstairs was, I would have taken 100 nights with her over a single minute in the basement. The basement belonged to him. If the upstairs entity was cold and sorrowful, the downstairs entity was pure, unadulterated malice. The basement was a sprawling, unfinished cavern of concrete and exposed pipes, and it constantly smelled of damp earth, rust, and cheap, bitter tobacco. There was a palpable weight to the air down there, an aggressive darkness that felt like it was actively trying to crush you. I refused to go down there alone, but one afternoon, my father sent me down to fetch a wrench from his toolbox. "Come on, champ, don't be silly," he had chuckled, patting my shoulder. "It's broad daylight. Nothing is gonna get you. Go grab the wrench." I swallowed hard, grabbed the flashlight, and began my descent down the rickety wooden stairs. 1, 2, 3. With every step, the air grew thicker. The silence was deafening, pressing against my eardrums. I reached the bottom and walked toward the workbench. Suddenly, from the darkest, furthest corner of the basement, the boiler room, came a sound that froze the blood in my veins. Bang! 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 3 violently loud, rhythmic crashes slammed against the concrete wall. It wasn't the sound of pipes settling. It sounded like a massive, furious man taking a sledgehammer to the foundation. I froze, the flashlight trembling in my hand, illuminating dancing dust motes in the air. Then came the feeling. It's hard to describe, but you know the sensation when someone is standing right behind you, staring at the back of your neck? Multiply that by 1,000. It was a heavy, predatory gaze filled with absolute hatred. I didn't wait to find out what was in the shadows. I dropped the flashlight, scrambled up the stairs on my hands and knees, and slammed the door shut, locking it behind me. When I told my dad, he just rolled his eyes. "Water hammer in the pipes," he explained patiently. "I need to bleed the radiators this weekend. You're letting your imagination run wild." No matter how much I pleaded, my parents refused to believe me.
They rationalized every smell, every sound, and every terrifying encounter. I was utterly alone in my terror, trapped in a house that hated me. This psychological torture continued for years. I grew older, learning to live with the fear, developing coping mechanisms. I slept with headphones in. I learned exactly which floorboards to avoid. I became an expert at ignoring the unnatural. Until the night I couldn't ignore it anymore. The night the house finally made its move.
I was 16 years old. It was a miserable, stormy Friday night in late October. The wind was howling, lashing rain against the windows in angry sideways sheets. My parents were attending a charity gala in the city and wouldn't be home until well past midnight. For the first time in my life, I was completely alone in the house of 1809. I tried to keep my mind occupied. I turned on every single light on the first floor. I ordered a pizza. I cranked up the volume on the television, playing a loud, obnoxious comedy movie in the living room to drown out the oppressive silence of the house. Around 10 p.m., the storm intensified. Thunder rattled the antique window panes, and lightning flashed in strobe-like bursts. Then, the movie cut off. The television screen went black. The lamps flickered, once, twice, and died. The house plunged into absolute, suffocating darkness. Perfect, I muttered to myself, trying to keep my voice steady. Just a power outage. It's just a storm.
I grabbed my cell phone and turned on the flashlight app. I decided to sit on the living room sofa and wait it out. The living room was large, and it featured a set of beautiful floor-to-ceiling French doors that led out to a back patio. Because of the heavy rain and the drop in temperature outside, the glass on the French doors had completely fogged up with condensation. I sat on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, staring at the dimly lit room. The silence was heavy. Too heavy. It didn't feel like an empty house. It felt like a house that was holding its breath. Suddenly, the temperature in the living room plummeted. It wasn't a gradual chill. It was an instantaneous, freezing shock to the system. I could see my own breath pluming in the beam of my phone's flashlight. But this time, the scent wasn't lavender. It was damp earth and bitter tobacco. He had come upstairs.
My heart began to hammer against my ribs like a trapped bird. I didn't move a muscle. I just sat there, staring blankly ahead, praying to whatever God was listening to make it stop. My gaze drifted toward the fogged-up French doors. In the dim, ambient light from the storm outside, I saw it. Right in the center of the glass, about 5 feet off the ground, a small, circular patch of the condensation began to clear. It didn't look like a raindrop washing it away. It looked exactly like someone had leaned forward and exhaled a hot, heavy breath directly onto the glass. I stopped breathing, my mind completely short-circuited. I tried to tell myself it was just a weird draft, just the storm playing tricks on the glass. Then, the handprints appeared. Slowly, agonizingly slowly, right next to the breath mark, 5 long, thick fingers began to press into the condensation. The moisture was wiped away as the shape of a massive human hand formed on the glass.
Oh my God, I thought, absolute panic gripping my throat. Someone is outside. There is a man on the patio. But as I stared at the handprint, my blood ran colder than the air in the room. I noticed a detail. I noticed the way the water droplets were pooling and streaking. The handprint wasn't wiping the condensation from the outside. The handprint was wiping the condensation from the inside. Whatever was making that mark wasn't standing on the patio looking in. It was standing directly in front of me, between the couch and the doors, pressing its hand against the glass from inside the living room. A second handprint appeared, right next to the first one. Screech. The sound of wet flesh dragging across glass echoed through the silent room as the invisible hand slowly slid downward, leaving 2 long, clear trails through the fog. The heavy scent of tobacco and wet earth rushed my face.
I didn't scream. I didn't think. Pure, primal survival instinct took over. I dropped my phone, bolted off the couch, and blindly sprinted through the dark house. I hit the front door at a full run, twisted the deadbolt, threw it open, and launched myself off the porch into the freezing torrential rain. I ran down the long dirt driveway, slipping and falling in the mud, scraping my knees, but I didn't stop. I ran all the way to the main road, sought shelter under a neighbor's well-lit porch nearly a mile away, and curled into a ball, shaking violently until my parents finally found me hours later. I refused to go back. I sat in my parents' car, covered in mud and shivering, and told them that if they tried to force me back into that house, I would run away and they would never see me again. Seeing the absolute unhinged terror in my eyes, they believed me. I stayed at a friend's house for the rest of the month while my mother packed up my belongings. We moved out of the house of 1809 shortly after. Years passed. I went to college, got a job, and tried my hardest to bury the memories of that house. My parents and I never spoke about it. It became a silent, unspoken taboo in our family. But secrets have a way of demanding to be heard. When I was 26, 10 years after that terrifying night, I was sitting in a brightly lit, noisy diner with my parents, having a casual Sunday brunch. Out of nowhere, my father set his coffee cup down, looked at my mother, and then looked at me. He looked older, tired, and deeply guilty. "We need to talk about the house," he said quietly.
I froze, a piece of toast halfway to my mouth.
"Dad, no, we don't."
"We do," my mother interjected, her voice trembling slightly. She reached across the table and took my hand. "We owe you an apology. A massive apology. We thought we were protecting you by not telling you, by pretending it was all in your head. But we were wrong." I stared at them, the old, familiar dread creeping back into my chest. "Telling you what?" My father sighed, rubbing his temples. "When we bought the house, the real estate agent legally had to disclose the property's history to us. We thought it was just local gossip, urban legends. But after what you went through, and after things we experienced ourselves but never admitted to each other, we realized it was all true." He leaned in closer. "The previous owners bought the house in the 1960s. Their names were Elias and Abigail. Abigail was a sweet, frail woman. Elias was a monster. He was an abusive, violent alcoholic. He made her life a living hell. In her late 70s, Abigail developed a severe illness. She became bedridden. My mother squeezed my hand. She spent the last 3 years of her life trapped in her bedroom, slowly dying in agony while her husband neglected her. She died in that bed, the exact spot where we put your bed. The memory of the mattress dipping, the cold weight, the smell of funeral flowers, it all rushed back, hitting me like a physical blow. She wasn't trying to scare me. She was just reliving her agonizing confinement. "What about Elias?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. A few months after Abigail passed, my father continued, his face grim. Elias was heavily intoxicated. He was walking down into the basement. The police report stated he tripped and fell down the wooden stairs. But he didn't die from the fall. He broke his legs and his spine. He lay at the bottom of the basement stairs in the dark for 3 days, dragging himself across the concrete, screaming for help until his heart finally gave out. The banging on the walls, the sheer furious hatred radiating from the basement, the heavy, dragging handprints on the glass. It wasn't a monster from a fairy tale. It was the enraged, trapped soul of an evil man who died a miserable, agonizing death in the dark.
I sat back in the diner booth, the bustling noise of the restaurant fading away, replaced by the phantom smell of bitter tobacco and the sound of heavy, dragging flesh against wet glass. I finally understood the terrifying truth of the house of 1809. It wasn't just haunted. It was a purgatory. A spiritual prison where an abused woman and her monstrous abuser were locked together for eternity, replaying their trauma and their rage on anyone unfortunate enough to step inside their tomb. I have never been back to that town, and I never will.
Do you believe that places can absorb the trauma of the past? Have you ever lived in a house that felt like it was watching you, waiting for the lights to go out? If you have your own chilling experiences, don't keep them to yourself. Share your stories in the comments below. Subscribe to the channel for more true horror. And remember, the next time you see breath on a cold window pane, make absolutely sure you know which side of the glass it's coming from.